Hi guys, welcome to an all-new episode of Convos on the Pedicab. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. We're actually joined by the front-running candidate for District 6 in Austin, Texas, Mackenzie Kelly.
Hi Alex, it's so great to be here.
Mackenzie, thank you so much for coming on the show. Before we get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about District 6, where it's located, the types of people that you are going to be representing when you hopefully win this race?
Definitely. So District 6 is where I've lived my entire life. Born and raised in Austin, but before the 10-1 system happened, District 6 was still there. It was still part of Austin, and I'm just born and raised there. So my family still lives there, my parents, my in-laws, my daughter and I with my husband. We live there as well. And so I went to the schools there. I know the district very well. I spent 8 years as a volunteer firefighter with the Jollyville Fire Department there. And really, I'm running for city council in Austin because I want to represent that district. We're underrepresented right now, and I just needed to step up so that somebody who had a history of that area and knew what everybody there wanted would be able to represent it.
No, very, very understandable. My first job in Austin was in District 6. I bet you didn't know that. I worked at an after-school program.
Really?
Abacus School of Austin, baby.
Yeah.
So I was like an after-school program counselor for like a few months with like elementary school kids. I was horrible at the job.
Yeah.
But District 6 was like the first area that I worked in Austin. And, one of the things I noticed was that District 6 is a whole different world.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's mostly it's very suburban.
It's almost like, it's like mini Cedar Park.
Yeah.
It's a mini Cedar Park. It's a mini Round Rock. A lot of a whole bunch of that district is in Williamson County.
Yes, so it's the only district that is both Travis and Williamson. What I have heard from other people is it's basically the last stop before people leave Austin. It's far enough away from downtown that they feel like they're still in Austin, but it's also safer traditionally, except with defunding the police, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, so let's actually, let's just get into it right now.
Okay.
So the city just passed a $170 million budget cut for APD. And the whole issue of policing, it's a very contentious issue, Mackenzie. It's extremely contentious. You look at what happened to George Floyd. You and I both agree that was murder. You watch the video of what happened to Mike Ramos. While I'm not going to go so far as to say it's murder, they did not need, in my opinion, I don't think that the police officers needed to fire any weapon at him. It didn't seem like he posed that type of a threat. I feel as though if the police were better trained and better at de-escalation and more confident in their abilities, then I don't think that it would have gotten to that point. And then, Jacob Blake, I feel as though if the cops were better at grappling, if they were better at hand-to-hand combat, if they knew how to actually subdue a suspect properly and were, like I said, better trained in a wrestling-based martial art, Jacob Blake would have never escaped from the cops and there would have been no need to shoot him. So I think that that's my summation of how I feel regarding this. But either way, you see these videos circulating the internet and it creates outrage, justifiably. And then as a result, the city comes through and cuts $170 million from the police budget. And while we need police reform, I don't like the way in which they did it. And I would like you to share your thoughts on that.
Definitely. Trial by media is what we're under every day, right? So something terrible happens to somebody and then we hear about it on the news and everybody makes assumptions and they assume, the worst, right? So,
of course, yeah.
So, yeah. And I think that when you really look at what the city council has done by passing these poor policies and defunding the police, or even the homelessness issue, which we'll get into later,
We're going to talk about homelessness too, because I know that you have a certain perception about how you have a certain perception that the city has of you regarding homelessness, and there's some things we need to correct about that. But let's talk about policing first, since we're already on that.
But with homelessness and defunding the police specifically, I think you can use those two examples of how the city of Austin has not had solutions or data-driven ideas in place before changing policies, right? So we can sit here and we can say, yeah, maybe the police budget's too big. But we need to really look at that budget and find out what things are going towards and maybe do an external audit before we do budget cuts,
Agreed.
Before we have a knee-jerk reaction. And we do need reforms in the police department. And so I'm unique as a candidate in that I'm the only candidate for Austin City Council, and none of the other city council members have taken this class. I know, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, so tell me about the class.
The Austin Police Department Citizens Police Academy. It's a 14-week-long program, and we go department by department and learn all about the inner workings of APD. So APD has a policy. It's called the Response to Resistance Policy, and it outlines if-then statements basically for how they're going to respond to certain situations. And, it's really hard to sit there and, I guess, Monday morning quarterback what the police do. The only way that we're going to figure out ways for them to do things better is to audit all of that curriculum, audit their policies externally, and then come up with solutions to things like racial bias or responding to resistance if appropriate.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I do think that $440 million is a little bit much to spend on one particular government service.
Right.
So I do think that if you were to get an external audit, you could trim the budget down tremendously and do it in a way that's equitable and fair. I also think that out of $440 million, we only spend $2.5 million, and they actually cut this in their new thing, but we were only spending $2.5 million on community policing. So you would think that with all that money that we spend on APD, you would maybe, I don't know, allocate more than 1/440th of the budget to actual community policing, which has been known to increase witness cooperation, reduce crime, create trust amongst communities.
Right.
And also, when trust like that exists, it does by default hold police officers more accountable
I agree.
to their actions. So you would think that you would try to invest more in community policing and maybe, I don't know, cut funding for Lake Patrol or something like that, or maybe
I
like
disagree with that.
You think so?
Yeah, definitely.
1.5 million for Lake Patrol?
I absolutely adore, and I am fully behind the idea of community policing. I think it's great. However, we just cut the last academy. We lost our most diverse class ever.
No, and I don't think we should do that. I
Problems,
disagree with the fact that they're cutting classes.
Right.
That's a really bad idea.
So, but when you look at it from a different perspective, 30,000-foot view from there, we're back at staffing levels where our police department was in 2015. We need to have more police officers in order to be able to better provide community policing. And without that, we're not going to be successful in that endeavor.
No, I agree. And we also spend $63 million on debt services and stuff like that. So there's a lot of nonsense and fluff and pork in these. If you were to look and study the APD budget, and we could probably trim that down to create a more equitable plan.
But it's one of the biggest departments in the city, so of course it's going to have a
lot of
higher
that stuff.
budget than
Right.
other departments.
And that's fine if it does have a higher
Especially
budget.
next to Austin Energy. Those two are two of the biggest departments.
And look, if our police budget is the highest budget out of all the things that we're spending money on, it is what it is. But if you can, if you could shave off a chunk of $440 million,
yeah.
While not sacrificing officer positions, while improving training, while making them better at being cops, we should look. That's what we have to look into instead of just cutting money from a department. The way in which they're doing it, and also to elaborate. So there's two things, right? And there's a lot more than two things, but I'm going to go on two things right now. So the first thing is that I honestly don't think the city even wants to defund APD. I think the city went so overkill in how they defunded the police. They almost knew, or they have to know, that Greg Abbott and the state legislature, they're going to come in next spring, next January, and they're going to override that decision. So it was just literally a whole lot of nothing and a whole bunch of empty platitudes and virtue signaling is what the city did. And secondly, if you're going to cut that much money from our police department, you would think that some of that money would go to the small businesses and our bars and our live music venues and the people in our service industry who were not able to work or provide for themselves as a result of these unconstitutional draconian lockdowns that were implemented by the city. And the fact that they're not doing that, that's why it's so divisive. If Mayor Adler, if Kassar, if Flanagan, if all these people said, hey, look, we're in this pandemic, our city's struggling, our small businesses are dying, people are really trying to stay afloat, we need to cut some money from the budget for a year or so to help these small businesses. This is temporary. We're going to fix this. We're going to improve policing while we do this. You would see a lot less of a backlash, I think.
Well, and I think that there's a lot of credit to what you're saying, but I also think that it's important for me to remind everybody that I'm the only candidate in District 6 who's going to push for external city audit. And I think that I mean, well, I know I've said that since the beginning, but one of the reasons that I'm bringing that up is because you may have seen in the news recently, the individual who was employed at the library stole over $1 million in printer toner.
Why would anybody steal $1 million in printer toner?
It doesn't even matter what the motive is. That's $1 million
That's a
that
lot.
could have gone to community policing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So
they
we
could have
need
gone
to
to help our service industry and help our
need
bars
more
and our music
oversight
venues. Yeah.
in the city government because it's corrupt, and we need to get fresh blood in there so that we can fix those problems.
Mackenzie, I got a question.
Okay.
How do you feel about grappling training, training and consistent training and proficiency in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Judo or Sambo or wrestling being a staple for the Austin Police Department?
Well, and I know that's part of your platform.
That is, yeah.
And I know that you've been pushing for that. And I also know that as part of their training, they already do some of those things.
But they don't do it consistently enough. I go to 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, and I've trained Jiu-Jitsu for a pretty long time, and I've trained with a lot of cops at the gym, and the majority of the cops, there's some who are like really good. Like there's some like brown belts, purple belts, really good blue belts, a couple black belts that are phenomenal, right? But those guys are few and far between. The majority of cops that I see walk in and roll around on these mats with, like I can manhandle them. And a regular guy like me should not feel as though they should be able to physically manhandle 80% of the people on the Austin police force. I think that is an issue, and I think that...
Have you been in contact with 80% of the people on the police force?
I'm throwing out a hypothetical number, Mackenzie.
I'm just asking.
No, I'm throwing out a hypothetical...
Know.
I'm throwing out a hypothetical number because a very small... If you were to, do a survey of the amount of people in APD who are blue belts and above in jiu-jitsu, I guarantee you it would be a very small number.
So what is the benefit for them being blue belts or above?
You're going to be more proficient at holding down a suspect if the suspect gets confrontational without having the need or justification to use excessive or deadly force.
I understand that. That makes sense.
But
that's where the response to resistance policy comes in. You respond to an incident. My understanding is you respond to an incident with the same level of force.
Understandably, but what if the suspect is bigger and stronger than you and you're scared for your life, and then all of a sudden you pull a gun out?
That's training, but I think there's other things that they can do in addition to training. I mean, I'm not saying that there's any discredit to what you're suggesting. I just think that it needs to be done by an external source to see what would be measurable.
Fine, that's fine, but that should be a requirement. And there are guys. Do you know who Travis Joyner is? So Travis Joyner is this super high-level black belt. He trains with Tim Kennedy.
Okay.
And he actually does like a lot of grappling and a lot of workshops with the police department.
That's
but
good.
But it's optional for them. And I really think that it should be something mandatory. And they should look into, increasing Travis Joyner's hours.
There's definitely value with that.
Yeah, and making that like it a requirement for them to actually have to train consistently.
They don't need flamethrowers though.
Yeah, that's in the past, right? Although, if you want to get into this, Italian mayors in Italy during the quarantine were actually, and you can Google this. This is fact checkable.
I think I saw the video.
Yeah, they literally threatened police officers with flamethrowers to come after people who were violating quarantine. So they were actually doing it. No one was batting an eyelash then. So
that was in Italy, right?
In Italy.
It's different.
They're taking pages out of my 2018 mayoral playbook, Mackenzie. That's
no, I know all. I mean, look, like
that's what's been happening.
When I ran for city council in 2014, it's no secret I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that something needed to change in Austin, and I wanted to represent people. I raised less than $200, and I got 5th out of 6th place with 9% of the vote.
I got 6th out of 7th place. Look at you now. You're probably going to take District 6 home with you.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that. But one more thing that I also want to bring up.
Yeah.
So, do you know that I was downtown in Austin the night that Garrett Foster died?
Really?
Yeah, I was down there.
Were you pedicabbing?
Yeah, I was trying to give rides and see what was going on. I was trying to feel things out,
I can't even go downtown.
Man, it's honestly not that bad. I'm telling you,
it's not that bad for you. I'm a woman. We have to have people at UT campus, women late at night who are being robbed
by the guy in the SUV.
That's awful.
Do you follow Teddy Roosevelt on Twitter?
I do.
Yeah, so I see
Shout
a lot
out
of
to
that.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt.
I was listening to his podcast
the councilman.
with Brad Swale.
It was really good. I didn't fully finish it, but I want to see the face behind.
I don't know if we'll ever see that mask taken off.
One day I'll ask if he wants to come on the show.
I don't know. I think he likes his anonymity.
Yeah, well, we'll give him a costume. We'll give him a BoJack Horseman mask or like a Spider-Man mask or something along those lines to just conceal his identity if that's how he chooses to play it.
Yeah. At least we know what his voice sounds like.
We know what his voice sounds like.
And thanks to him and Johnny K for doing all those open records requests and bringing to light everything that's happening.
Good. So who is Johnny K too? That's another question.
I met him one time. I don't remember anything about meeting him. I was doing a Recall Adler signing event, and He came up and said, "I'm Johnny K on Twitter," and
That's pretty cool.
who knows if it really was him or not.
Who knows? Anybody could say that, right? Yeah, it doesn't. You never know.
Yeah.
But one of the things, this is what I want to segue into, right? Because we got a little sidetracked.
Yeah,
talking
no, it's
about
fine.
Our favorite Twitter personalities, but I was down there when Garrett Foster died. I didn't see him get shot, but I heard the gunshot go off.
What was that like?
I just heard a gunshot. I was like, oh shit, somebody just got shot. And so I pedal over to that area.
Well,
because I'm assuming it's by the protest.
Why would you go there? Don't people go away
No, because
from
look,
shots?
I think that if you're out downtown and you're going to be giving rides to people, you have a civic duty to try and to help people if you're in a position where you can help people.
Okay, that
that's
makes sense.
what you should be doing, and that's why, honestly, why I feel like I'm running for public office is because I feel like you have a civic duty to try to make the world around you a somewhat of a better place, or at least stop it from getting worse.
Right.
So that's my justification. Of course, I'm going to go down there and see what's happening if I can, So I go down there, right, and I see a bunch of these. I see this guy laying on the ground, right, and it took like over 20 minutes for an ambulance to get there, right, over 20 minutes, and then the cops were the first people on the scene, and the cops just had no idea how to take care of Garrett Foster at all. And granted, some of these Antifa guys, they weren't helping their case with how they were speaking to the cops and how they were acting as a result of that stuff. But that's not the point of this discussion. The point is that
you think cops need EMT training.
Yeah, because I
Right.
was I asked one of the cops while this was happening. I was like, "Hey, officer, are y'all EMT certified?" And they said no, and I'm just like, wait a minute. If you guys had the same EMT certification that a paramedic or a firefighter had, you know how many times you're the first people on the scene of an accident? You're at the academy, right? You know how many lives are going to get saved as a result of that?
I think that's something to consider, definitely.
Yeah,
But I think it would also
reshape
weed
the narrative.
a lot.
It would weed a lot of bad people out, which is good too, and it would make the training a little bit longer, which is also good. And most importantly, it would reshape the narrative. If we were able to successfully do this, you're going to see so many lives get saved. It will reshape the narrative over how we view policing as a whole, and this whole defund the police bullshit. It wouldn't even be in the framework of discussion if we made these reforms.
I can see value in that, but I also know that it would take longer. The requirements are longer. There are differences between EMTs and paramedics and the drugs that they can push and the things that they can do.
I understand that, but they
And
still have the
also-
EMT basic certification.
Yeah,
Just make them have that EMT basic certification.
And they do go through some basic medical training.
Yeah, but it should be a little more. If
Right.
you're the first people on the scene of an accident, it should be a little bit more. You got to do anything that you can to A, make the cops better at their job, and B, reshape the narrative. Because if we don't reshape that narrative, and things keep going what they are, especially with how these social media tech companies are pushing this outrage culture narrative, you're going to create a communist revolution, and nobody wants that.
No,
So you
nobody
have
wants
to
that at all.
actually push meaningful reform and really be about it, because this is about officer safety too.
Right.
Meaningful police reform is literally about officer safety too.
Do you know of any departments that require, anywhere across the United States or the world, that require EMT
I don't, but
certification?
why not Trailblaze?
I'd be like, Google.
Yeah, if that doesn't even if that's not a thing right now, this should be. Why not let Austin be a trailblazing
and that's
city
a
for that?
positive reform. I mean, there's obviously
positive.
racial bias that we need to look at, and we need to look into the hiring practices, and we need to ensure that we're hiring the best of the best, and not just somebody who was bullied in high school that
Sure.
wants to get power to become a police officer.
Agreed. And I also think that you should be policing the neighborhood that you live in.
That's tough right now with affordability.
Yeah, well, it depends on where you. Yeah, that is kind of true, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to work on lowering the taxes and not
Maybe
doing the code next and these new land
boondoggles?
codes. Yeah, these boondoggles do
Project
make it a
Connect.
lot harder for people to
And
be
I
able
don't
to
disagree
do
with
that.
you. I think it's important for somebody to have a vested interest in the community. Maybe that's where they are, regularly patrolling. Maybe that's where they are working for most of their career as
But then
patrol.
what you can do, Mackenzie, too, is you can have more recruiting at our high schools to help
They have a
facilitate
very thorough recruiting program. It's very impressive, actually.
that. You want to share?
People from all over the United States come to work for the City of Austin Police Department.
Well, because it's not a bad gig. You know what I mean? You get what's the starting salary for APD? Like $64K a year or something like that?
I'm not sure. Well, they used to come from all over the world or all over the country.
Not anymore.
I wouldn't think so.
Not
I mean,
anymore.
look at the morale. It's gone down. I mean,
But it's going down everywhere. And to be honest, I would still rather be a cop in Austin than in almost any other major city in the country.
what's preventing you from applying to be a police officer?
I like smoking weed too much. No.
Yep, that would disqualify you. Definitely.
No, I mean, no.
I don't. So I can't really.
No, look. In all seriousness, it's not the worst idea. I mean, you never know. I'm not opposed to doing it. I'll take the test next time it's available.
Yeah, but if a video comes up where you admitted that you smoked marijuana, then you can't.
Yeah, but
it would disqualify you.
Yeah, but whatever. It's a risk I'm willing to take. Well, I have full control over how I edit these videos. If it comes down to me saying, "Hey, I'm gonna go be a cop," maybe that little clip will get edited out, Mackenzie.
Do you want to be a cop, or do you want to pretend to be a cop?
Yeah. All right. I think we talked about policing.
Yeah.
We talked about policing enough. Let's talk about homelessness.
Okay.
Let's talk about homelessness.
Yeah, I mean, just like everybody in the city, when the homeless camping ordinance was repealed, I was very frustrated. And I mean, I posted pictures, and I mean, it was frustrating. It's like, what is the city doing? Like, it's our whole city's turning to trash, is what it seemed like. But you know what? As I've learned. Over the last several months, I've grown a lot as a person, and I've learned a lot, and I've had the opportunity to talk with homeless people. I cleaned up an abandoned homeless camp in Austin a couple months ago. Those living conditions are atrocious.
It's atrocious.
I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to know what was your take on the homeless when you first started Take Back Austin? And what's it like now that you've been doing these cleanups and whatnot? Like, how has that perspective changed? I want to hear that. That's what that's what all me and all the viewers and as well as the residents in District 6, we want to know.
Yeah. So I didn't start Take Back Austin. It was started before.
By Cleopatra, right? But you're the president.
Nope, Cleo did not start it either.
No.
Mark Garcia was the president for a long time.
Okay.
And he wanted to step out of that role, and he recognized that I was very passionate and people were reacting well to, the stories I had to tell and the things I had to say. And so he approached me along with the board of directors for the nonprofit at the time. We had lunch, and he asked if I would be the new president. So I took over being the president in March. It's very frustrating to be a resident in Austin and to feel like you really don't have a voice at City Hall. The people who show up are paid activists who are all in an echo chamber saying the same thing.
This is true. I know that is very true.
And it's frustrating because, I envision myself looking out from the dais and seeing those people and listening to them, but that's not everybody that is my constituency. There's a lot more people who have jobs, who work, who have families that can't make it to city council every Thursday or don't have the time to call in and try and talk about things. And I really feel like the city council made a knee-jerk reaction by repealing the camping ban. And look, it's not illegal for somebody to be homeless, but the crimes of desperation that come out of homelessness are what's illegal.
Well, I think that I don't think that you should punish. So I'm going to give you my take on this, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think you should punish homelessness at all. I really don't. But I also don't think you should be enabling it.
Right.
And what the city's doing right now is they are, in my opinion, they're enabling vagrancy. If you look at all these camps, there's trash all over the place. Nobody's really doing anything to clean this, and you could literally just offer tax breaks to businesses to do cleanups to help keep the trash kind of clean.
That's a good idea.
You could also use the cleanups for diversion programs. You commit a stupid low level crime or a dumb misdemeanor, just clean a couple homeless camps up, and then we'll just we'll dismiss your case if it's insignificant or trivial, or even if a kid gets caught like smoking pot or something, and they don't want to go to ALC, just clean up like 3 homeless camps, and then you don't have to go, or you can leave ALC early, just as a rehabilitative measure of justice.
Yeah.
And I also think that you could look. I think that every time you park your car, that you should be able to donate money to like whatever homeless service organization is approved by the city, and then you can do that, and that could possibly replace all the taxes that we have to pay to help facilitate this problem. And then you also got to start finding and citing for littering if none of that works.
Yeah, I mean it's bad for the environment. Where
it's
are all
horrible.
the people who care about the salamanders now?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
they're really not
they're
around.
Nowhere. And also we have like our air quality's been downgraded to like very unhealthy, and we're the only city in Texas with that qualification. We pride ourselves on climate change, and then we're also the only city in Texas that allows urban camping. So you got to factor in maybe that's correlated.
I think one of the biggest reasons that we're unable to help the people who are experiencing homeless right now is because they're spread out all over the place. I've talked to many homeless people who don't want to go to a shelter, or there's no space in the shelter, and they want their own individual camping area. If we were to provide areas where they could camp, instead of letting them be all under the overpasses, we could provide them with the services that they need, give them job training, help lift them up out of that situation.
Yeah, well, they don't want to do that because it's a money grab. I mean, this is my opinion, not to put my tinfoil hat on or whatnot, but I think this is a money grab for Adler and his real estate buddies, because anytime they when you have an influx of homeless people and the homeless percentage is rising 40% on a year-over-year basis from last year to this, which is what happened with community impact, right? Well, you need to put these homeless people somewhere, right? So what happens? You got to build a hotel, you got to build a house, you got to build something for them.
But that's not sustainable.
No,
We're
no
throwing
kidding.
money
Mackenzie,
at a pit.
No shit, all right? We know this. I'm just elaborating my point on this, though, right?
Yeah.
So who's going to build the hotel? Who's going to build that house?
Developers.
Yeah. Probably the same developers that contributed heavily to the campaigns of our city council candidates and our
like my
mayor.
opponent.
Yeah. So think about that. And then our taxes are literally going to help these developers recoup their expenditures to these city officials and then some. So it's literally a giant money grab, and this is them profiting exponentially off their property values can go down, taxes still go up, and then all of a sudden developers get to scoop up more property at a cheaper rate. And then, not to get super conspiratorial, Mackenzie, but then they're registering them to vote. Then you're registering them to vote.
How do you register somebody to vote that doesn't have an address?
You can register homeless people to vote. I took a class about that, and I know I'm friends with Casey Ramos, and he told me about that too.
Really?
Yeah, you can register homeless people to vote. They can still register to vote, and they will have an address if they're staying in these hotels and these shelters. And oh man, look at that! The hotel that they're building a new shelter in District 4 right now, and who's running in District 4? You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like a really convenient way to get votes for certain developer-friendly candidates by building homeless shelters, encouraging a bunch of homeless people to come here, to come to these areas, registering them to vote.
That's frustrating.
Yeah, through those candidates by proxy. And then what do you think is going to happen? It's like you're weaponizing homelessness to expedite displacement and gentrification. And I'm going to tell you this. Once regular Austinites get pushed out of Austin, right, and they get replaced by these ultra wealthy, super bougie people that are going to come in, that are going to actually pay top dollar like New York City, San Francisco prices, then they're going to start repealing all the camping stuff, and then they're going to add to their police force, and then they're going to do all of that stuff. So all this progressive talk about how they're going to defund APD and how they really want to help the homeless and help people who are unhoused and actually provide affordability to people, it's all smoke and mirrors. Like it is complete BS. If you were to dig deep, that's my theory on it.
Well, thank you for sharing your theory with me. I'd like to share with you. I actually was able to get a meeting with Alan Graham. He runs Mobile Loaves and Fishes.
Ooh, I actually always wanted to meet him too. So
yeah, no, he's awesome, and he has such a servant heart, and he's such a leader out there, and he's paving the way to end chronic homelessness. It was incredible to see what they have going on out there, and just to know that all those people, I mean, they've all experienced losses, right?
Yeah.
And they need that community to have them lifted up out of that situation. And so it was heartwarming and incredible to see what they have going on.
So what do they have going on?
We need more community partnerships like that, because the city throwing money at hotels is not going to solve homelessness.
No, but
and I'm very skeptical.
No, but it will help their donor. It'll keep their donors happy.
It's frustrating.
It will keep their donors very happy, though. But that's why they're doing it. It's so they can keep their donors happy.
Right. So Alan Graham has the program out there, and they accept applications for people experiencing chronic homelessness. So if you've been on the streets for a year or more, you can apply to be in the program to get a tiny home. And whatever, I mean, they have different types of homes available, and they have some that are being built, and they actually just purchase more land, and it's incredible. I mean, these people, I mean, it's awesome. Everybody is so happy, and it's really neat. They take care of themselves out there and each other, and I like that a lot more than I like seeing some of the mayhem under the streets. I don't know if you know this about me, but back in January, at the very end of January of this year, I was walking from 6th Street with some of my friends to go to my car, and I witnessed 2 homeless people stabbing each other right across from the police department.
Did not know that.
Yeah. And they were arguing over, housing. Somebody had gotten notice that they were going to get a place to stay, and the other person was upset. The frustrating part is that that's now common. That happens all the time.
And you also got homeless people who are that get hooked up by the city, and they're still panhandling also.
Yeah, that is frustrating too.
So we got to address it, and we got to do it fairly and equitably. Because I honestly think that our previous camping ordinance was not working. You know, when I was downtown, it wasn't cool seeing like 5 cops surrounding one crackhead, in the middle of 6th Street. Like that was not the right solution.
Right.
But the way in which they're solving these problems, you can't just enable urban camping without a plan to actually reduce the number of homeless people. And it seems like they're doing it to expedite and to increase the number of homeless people, so this way they can continue throwing more money at their developer buddies. That's really what it looks like. It's just it's like a giant pyramid Ponzi scheme with how they're doing this.
Well,
So.
I have hope in my heart that that's not the case. However, I do understand that there's a plan bigger than what I'm privy to, and I know that full and well. I just need to get to a place where I can actually make changes and speak out against things like this.
I agree. And I also think that it's creating more anti-homelessness, which how they're doing that. Because I used to always, I actually give a lot less money to homeless people, like in terms of like my change and like whatever I have, now that they've repealed the camping ordinance than before.
Oh, yeah.
I just noticed that like objectively, like I'm like less willing to want to share
Right.
than I was before, because now you just see people hitting you up for money constantly, whereas I didn't see it as
Yeah.
much. And then you don't want to, like, the city's enabling vagrancy, and there's all this stuff that's going on. So I just.
Right.
I don't know if it's really helping them, to be honest.
I mean, it's tough, right? So I got pictures. So my big giant signs went out, and I got pictures from supporters that it was an individual who looked like he was homeless with his cart of stuff, and then his clothes were hanging over my big giant sign, my 4x8.
Oh, I think I
sign.
heard the story, but share so everyone else can hear it.
Definitely. So his name's Walter.
Okay.
And he had been beat up and robbed by
Oh,
people under the
man.
overpass who were also homeless.
Okay.
And so he went to a spot where he felt safe, which just happened to be next to my campaign sign. So I went over there with some people from my team and my campaign team, and we watched from afar, and then we went up to him and we're like, hey, like, is everything okay? Do you need anything? And turns out Walter, the individual experiencing homelessness, has landscape experience, and he's looking for a job to be a landscaper. And he's in that situation not because he wants to be, but he's trying to get himself out of it. And I thought that was really admirable. So we gave him some food, a nice meal, and now we go check on Walter whenever we're driving by.
Any job leads for Walter?
Not yet. We have been searching, though. So, I mean, hopefully something comes up in the next couple days. But he's a veteran, and he thanked me for running for public office, which was really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he needs a hand up, and, we can't just give people handouts.
Yeah,
So.
you got to teach people how to fish, not give them fish. That's the
Right.
main
Yeah.
the main thing. All right. Pivoting once again. So I hear you've been getting some hate as a result of your campaign, and I feel like you're being kind of misunderstood as a candidate. I know Flanagan's campaign manager, what did he called you, like a Nazi or a fascist, or
Both.
did some? And that's a little concerning to me, because you know that I'm a Jew, right?
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I'm a Jew with a Star of David tattoo on my right arm, and we've been friends for a few months. You've always been very we've always been very nice and very helpful to me, and it just seems like
Yeah.
That's not being friends and going on the podcast with the Jew with the Star of David tattoo on their arm. It doesn't seem like something a Nazi or a fascist would do. So I just want you to elaborate on all that and just talk about how that made you feel and what your take on all that stuff is, because I don't think it's right.
Yeah.
I think that if people are going to criticize you, they should do it from a policy standpoint and not throw these words at you that could endanger your safety.
Yeah, I mean, it's always frustrating when people say things about you that aren't true, or they attack you personally because of policy differences. And I really think it's a sign of something bigger, which is they're intimidated by me.
Or they might just be so brainwashed that they just don't know too. 'Cause everyone's in like you said, there's so many
It's
paid
an echo
activists
chamber.
that everything's in an echo chamber, that if you're around an echo chamber long enough, you start believing it.
Yeah.
And I remember too, when I was especially during the first couple months of quarantine, I wasn't really doing very much social distancing, and I was still going out and about, going to Barton Springs. I was still doing jiu-jitsu with my friends secretly. Can't disclose too much more about that.
Yeah.
But almost 90+% of the people that I was interacting with were like big Trump supporters, because the people on the left were actually following these stay-at-home orders to a T and like shaming people for not following the stay-at-home orders. So
I
then
get
all of a
that,
sudden,
too.
when you're all of a sudden, I was becoming like super like right-wing and Trumpy for a minute, because that's all I was around
Right.
for like a couple months at a time. So I think that if you're like, just in defense, if you're around an echo chamber for a prolonged period of time of years and years, in contrast to like a couple months,
Yeah.
you definitely might he might just actually believe that.
Well, and I mean, look, I wear a mask. I have it on my wrist.
Well, that has nothing to do with fascism,
yeah,
right?
no, not at all. But I'm very misunderstood sometimes. I think people are intimidated by my belief system and by my values and by my moxie. I mean, I'm out here doing things that the average person wouldn't do. And it takes a lot to run for public office.
It takes a lot, yeah, it does.
And so you got to roll with the punches. I mean, we all have lives and we all do what we do. And in my heart, at the end of the day, I know that I'm a good person and that I'm right for this role. And I'm respectful of other people. I wear a mask if they want me to wear a mask. I don't if I don't need to, and I'm safely social distancing like we are now.
We are, yeah. This is actually your idea to have separate cabs because you want to really exercise caution and responsibility. Yeah. And you're doing it for the sake of your district, and I appreciate that, and that is very admirable. And for all future guests, we will do this podcast. We're going to do it in person. That's non-negotiable, and we're doing it on a pedicab. That's also non-negotiable. But other than that, we can social distance however you feel safe. And if somebody were to want me to wear a mask for this interview, I'm not opposed to it. I think this is about getting everybody involved, and this is about being as non-divisive as possible with these things and trying to get multiple perspectives interacting and feeling safe to interact. And that's what this should be about.
Well, and I mean, I work with the elderly, so I'm in and out of nursing homes and areas where people are at risk, and so I have to be safe.
You gotta
and
be
I
safe,
also, I scan my temperature every day and do the COVID questionnaire to make sure that I'm not experiencing symptoms. And I was around Congressman Dan Crenshaw and John Cornyn, who's a U.S. Senator, at the Travis County Republican Party Gala. And I got a lot of bad feedback about not having a mask on.
Okay, but who are you getting bad feedback from?
People online.
Yeah, people on
Trolls.
Twitter's, half of that stuff isn't even real. And like I said, they have just,
They're probably
they
not
can have like
voting
paid
either.
activists saying a bunch of nonsense that's going to have nothing to do with your campaign whatsoever.
It's just frustrating because I know that I am being as careful as I can, and even though sometimes it doesn't appear like I have a mask on all the time.
Well, you shouldn't have a mask on all the time. I think there are times to wear a mask, and there are times when you shouldn't wear a mask, and we need to have a reality-based discussion on mask wearing, and that's going to be our next topic, actually.
Okay.
And we're going to go back to Jacob very soon, but we're pivoting to mask wearing. We're talking about mask wearing right now, and I think that you should wear a mask when you're indoors. You should wear a mask if you're at the grocery store. You should wear a mask.
If you ride Capital Metro, definitely
wear
a
mask on public transportation. Wear a mask at the hardware store. Wear a mask at the gas
grocery
station.
store.
Yeah.
I don't wear it at the gas pump. Wear a mask when you talk. Unless somebody's on the other side of the pump.
No, but like when you're indoors, wear a mask when you're ordering food from somebody because you don't know what their situation is or if they want to be at work or how they feel. So that's when you wear the mask, and you wear it temporarily, keyword temporarily, because this shouldn't, if this is going on longer than a few months, this might not be about a virus.
Yeah.
My 2 cents. But I feel like when you're outdoors and you have an opportunity to breathe fresh air, you should not be wearing a mask. And you should not be wearing a mask when you're exercising, because it compromises the amount of oxygen that goes into your blood and your body, and that's actually going to be harmful to your health. You should not wear a mask when you're by yourself driving your car. You should not.
That always makes me laugh.
It's ridiculous. But you know what? It's not their fault. It is.
It's hard to take on and off,
They're doing that because they're so used to wearing a mask they forget, and that's a problem. I don't think you should ever get used to prolonged mask wearing, and I think that prolonged mask wearing also creates a barrier to communication.
Well, especially for people who are hard of hearing.
Yeah, well, it just expedites the division and the divisiveness and the isolation people are already feeling.
Yeah. What do you think about those clear masks?
I don't know. I think that at the end of the day, prolonged mask wearing provides a barrier to communication. And I think that we already are a society struggling with loneliness and misunderstanding and division and vitriol on the internet. And prolonged mask wearing is not helping address that. It is expediting it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most dangerous things that we could be dealing with right now. And I think if we had a realistic, honest discussion about when you wear a mask and when not to wear a mask, more people would probably be compliant and more people would be looking out for public health. But because everything is so divisive and because we don't trust the narrative coming from our politicians, because our politicians are shutting down these small businesses without providing meaningful aid to them, people are less likely to listen to you because they don't trust you. And it makes sense.
Look at how Adler handled and the rest of council handled the closing of South by Southwest. They put out a video right after they canceled it And they
telling people to
suggested
go to local
go
spot.
to local,
And
yeah.
now everything's canceled. So it's like within a week, hey, we're having South by. Then a few days later, we're not having South by. Then we're making a video telling people to go support their businesses.
Right.
Then we're shutting things down. Now we're
And
shaming
then
people
they
for
take
doing
the video.
anything.
The video's magically gone. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
gone.
Then
Where did it go? I
right,
wish I had
right,
a copy
right.
of it.
And then we're gonna shame people for going to the park, and we're
Yeah.
gonna shame people for going to restaurants.
I never
and, you
stopped
know, like,
going to the park.
I never did either.
Yeah.
No, that's ridiculous not to. I mean,
Just stay away from people. Don't get too close.
right.
You know?
Right. So what I'm saying though is that, some of the advice that our public health experts are giving us are like not good for public health. And when that gets factored in, people are a lot less likely to take necessary precautions. And then, one day a real deadly virus is going to come about. And because of how our city and how like our country and how we've handled this virus from a global standpoint, because of the deceit and the dishonesty when it comes to like the misinfo that's being perpetuated by our governments, by the tech companies, nobody's even going to believe is going to even believe you when an actual real pandemic happens.
I mean, hopefully we're better coordinated for a response to something
No,
like this
they're
now.
going to make it worse because now literally it's like the boy who cried wolf.
I don't
That's what
know.
it's
I mean, I
become.
worked in emergency management for a while as an emergency management technician, and you typically plan for the response to a pandemic or a disaster type situation. And I just think that the city of Austin's current leadership didn't coordinate a united front to where everybody did believe what was happening. And then if you look at it even deeper, they argued with the governor. Like, you have to have a nonpartisan, across-the-board approach to saving lives and getting out the message that needs to be heard instead of a petty disagreement because the governor's a Republican and the mayor's a Democrat.
I really don't like our governor, though. I strongly dislike our governor. I don't think he's a real conservative. I don't think he has much of a backbone, no pun intended.
Yeah, that's not funny.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
I
that's
didn't-
really not
Yeah,
funny.
I did not. Yeah, I just realized what
You
I
just
said.
made a personal attack,
Yeah, I
and you
just
just
realized-
said
I
you
just
have to go
realized-
after people's policies.
Yeah, I just realized that I did that. Anyway, but what I'm trying to say is that the reason I'm saying that is because of the fact that he hasn't really taken a strong stance on anything. And when it comes to reopening, right? He's arbitrarily shutting businesses down at will. He reopened the bars, and yeah, we had a surge in cases for a minute, but we've plateaued. But even then, you shut down these bars like on the weekend on a Friday night when they bought all their equipment and they bought all their alcohol and they bought everything for their establishment. You shut these things down, and these bars are already struggling, and then they spend tens of thousands of dollars buying their alcohol, buying their equipment, buying things for the weekend, and there's no way that they're going to recoup those losses when they're a struggling business. You're sitting on $6 billion in aid. None of that's going to help these establishments. And then you're moving the goalposts consistently when it comes to allowing them to reopen. And now when you are allowing them to reopen, they're not even going to be able to reopen in the cities that they're most needed because people like Adler and people like our Travis County judge are never going to allow it. So like you're just not looking out for people, man. That's how I feel with Abbott. With Abbott's decision making, he's not a strong leader.
I can understand where you're coming from, but again, in a person who has a position of power like that, he has different department leads or chiefs, like the Texas Division of Emergency Management Chief Nim Kidd, who I've met several times, and people from public health who are giving him information that we as common people don't have access to. And I'm not trying to give like just a reason for why he did, like an excuse, but it's very complicated at that level.
Sure, but he was probably getting so much pressure from all
it's
these
a really bad position to be in.
He was getting the governor of Florida. He didn't do that. The governor of Florida, stuck to his guns. The governor of Tennessee stuck to his guns. That's open. Arkansas bars are open. He could have followed in the path of real conservative leadership. The governor of South Dakota, she never even once issued a stay-at-home order or closed anything.
Do you know how many people live in South Dakota? Probably the entire
They had
population
Sturgis.
of
They had the
Austin.
Sturgis conference. They had the Sturgis motorcycle rally in South Dakota in the midst of
That's
this
true, they
pandemic,
did.
and they're doing okay. Like their hospitals are not being overwhelmed. Like this is what Abbott's doing right now in terms of arbitrarily choosing what stays open and what doesn't stay open. It is it's almost like he doesn't want to be governor anymore. He doesn't want to be governor anymore. That's what it says.
I know it's frustrating for you, but at the same time, in a situation like that, I have faith in my heart. I know that he has access to more information than I do. And like it or not,
But then you could say the same thing about
we voted him in.
But then you could say the same thing about Adler too then. And that's the problem. It's like you ultimately have to answer to your constituents, and what Abbott's doing right now with how he's closing the bars, and he did that because of pressure from the Texas Tribune and all these like China-centered media outlets, and like pressure from our mayors and pressure from a lot of people, these liberal paid activists, and you caved into pressure, man. Like that's what Abbott did. He caved into pressure when it comes to that. When it came to it, like there's no.
Have you tried reaching out to his office?
I will reach out to his office, and I will
write.
I will say something actually, and I might go to that conference on Saturday about the bar closures, and it would.
You mean the protests?
Yeah,
I'm staying away from protests.
You're staying. All right. So what's your take? Why?
So I mean, honestly, I just think it's irresponsible to be out protesting in a large group of people that you don't know.
While you're in a pandemic?
Yes. And I do believe in free speech. I do believe in peaceful protesting. But at the same time, my incumbent challenger, he was out in the middle of a protest, and he was chanting with the people who were out in the protest. Steve Adler also violated his own stay-at-home, stay-safe order.
And so did Kassar. Yeah, and it is weird that, you can get COVID from going to the 4th of July barbecue, but all of a sudden, like, hey, if you go to these BLM protests, you're not getting the virus.
And I think that it's wonderful that they're standing up for what they believe in, if that's what
I
they believe in.
I agree with that.
And I admire their tenacity. I may not agree with them, and that's okay. But you don't go out in the middle of a pandemic. That's another example of mixed messaging, just like what they did with South by Southwest.
Exactly, yeah. And the reason why, and like all the mixed messaging regarding all that stuff, Mackenzie, is another reason why people are not going to be willing to actually trust their government officials when a real pandemic actually happens, because this is like the boy crying wolf. Like that's really my take on it. You know what I mean? So like I don't know. I'm a little frustrated with how they've been handling that situation.
Right.
But so how do you feel about the closures and the bars being? Do you think the bars should reopen? Like, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, if we can do it safely, we need to. There's so many struggling owners of bars all over the place. I'm really good friends with a couple bar owners in District 6.
Okay.
One of them is Riata Bar and Grill. They've been there for 17 years,
all right.
And my friend Amy and her husband own it, and they just recently opened because they got a new license to be a restaurant, and so they were able to open. But, I mean, it's a little bit tricky, I mean, we need to do it in a way that's safe for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if you just operate them like restaurants temporarily, that's fine. But at the end of the day, the majority of people that are going to these bars are young people anyway. And even if a bunch of young people get this virus, our hospitalizations have stabilized for the past 2 months. You know, like for the past month, about 2 months, our hospitalizations have been relatively stable.
Yeah.
It's time for them to reopen. They have to reopen, otherwise we're not going to have an Austin.
Yeah.
If our bars and music venues can't sustain themselves, we're not going to have an Austin. One of the things that I do not understand is that, so Jimmy Flanagan, I believe he takes more money from real estate developers than any other candidate in this city council race. I think it's either him or Kassar, right?
They're right up there. I don't want to go negative on either of my opponents.
I don't. But it's odd though that that a candidate who's taking that much money from these neoliberal, predatorily capitalist companies have a card-carrying communist as their field manager. Like I don't understand why somebody would. What would the reasoning behind something like that be? That's the question.
Don't ask me. Ask Jimmy.
I might actually ask Jimmy about that, but I always found it odd.
Yeah,
that you're gonna
I have no idea.
like. I just find it odd that you're gonna have somebody with those belief structures be your field director when your actions are so contradictory towards that person's beliefs. Like it just seems like another reason why you shouldn't be trusting your council. That's really my take on it.
I mean, I think that it's prudent for anybody who's voting to take that power very seriously and to look into candidates to make sure that they are the people that you want representing your community.
I agree.
That's really the takeaway from all of this.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree with that. So I think we're pretty. We did talk about a lot of stuff, right, Mackenzie? We probably went pretty deep, and I appreciate you coming on.
Of course.
I think we're good. There was a little bit of there was some controversy about a week ago because there was a certain guest that you want nothing to do with.
Well, it's not that I want nothing to do with him. I mean, honestly, I know Robert Morrow, and we've talked several times, and he's Robert Morrow.
He's Robert Morrow. He's a guy in a jester's hat. He's entertaining. He's
very effective at getting his message across.
Well, he's very good at getting on ballots and winning elections for some weird reason.
I think it's his name.
He's great at winning.
Yeah.
He does a lot. He's really good at winning, Mackenzie.
But there's not a lot of work that goes into that. Literally, it's just because of his name. He has a very strong name. I can send you an article about it.
I would love to. I would love to see more about that. We talked about Code Next. What's your take on this rail? How do you feel about the rail?
I think that a 25% increase in your property taxes during a pandemic is a slap in the face to taxpayers, and I'm glad it's on the ballot so we can shut it down.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Do you trust the integrity of like the elections?
I do, for the most part. I know that people like Jennifer Fleck have spoken out about the integrity of elections and the process. My feeling on that is I need to just focus on my election and I need to win it. I'm glad that there are people like her who are brave and courageous and stand up for what they believe in, because she's taught me a lot just in her ability to stand up for what she believes in.
Okay.
And I can't wait to learn more about what's going on with that, because it's important. We need to keep our elections full of integrity. And it would really hurt my heart to find out later that it lacks integrity, because, I mean, I'm doing this for the right reasons. Hopefully everybody else who runs for office does it for the right reasons. But to find out that it's rigged would absolutely break me. All the work that we've put in over the last several months, all the people that I've talked to who believe in me, if we find out that there's something that's not right with the election process, then, I mean, that's crushing.
It is crushing, and that's not right. Yeah, I agree. But I'm glad we're on the same page with Project Connect. And my take is, like, I actually used to be very pro rail, like, up until the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because the pandemic, it changes the game up. Now
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're more people work from home. That we can't handle the tax burden. People are already struggling. That money should be going to saving our small businesses.
Yeah.
And then you factor in the fact, like, micromobility is going to be making such great advancements by the time this rail gets finished that the rail might just be obsolete by the time we build it.
Those would be good guests for you to have on, too, the people who are behind the anti-Prop A stuff.
I'll talk to them. That'd be a good thing. But anyway, Mackenzie, I think we've gone about an hour. I really appreciate your time. Like,
yeah.
This really says a lot about who you are as a person. Actually, you're the only city council candidate who's actually been willing to come onto a pedicab and talk about issues facing the city, and really shows that you're in touch with common everyday working folks like myself. So
thank you.
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. While we're air bumping, we got to be careful. We're cautious. Social distancing. We're really doing our best to slow the spread here. So thank you, Mackenzie.
Thank you.